Hello, folks. So, welcome to the last chapter. I don't remember how many mini lectures I broke this chapter up into, but regardless, this is the last chapter and not that difficult a chapter. So, really, you've done the difficult parts up front. So, let's get started with the respiratory system. The first couple mini lectures is really anatomy, but we'll just go through it and see if there's anything I want to add to what the book has laid out for you. First of all, here are the 5 functions of the respiratory system. So basically, what it does is it gets oxygen into your body and takes CO2 out of your body. CO2, as you're going to find out in Bio 252 and a little bit here, is a waste product that think of it as an acid because, in fact, it is an acid. And when you remove CO2 from your blood, you can regulate your pH, raise your pH back to normal values if it's becoming too acidic. So getting oxygen in and getting CO2 out. Now, the caveat is this. We'd rather put atmospheric air into our lungs that's clean. So our respiratory system also has some anatomical features that clean the air as it enters our lungs. All right, so those are the 5 functions of the respiratory system. You can read through them. Let's look at an overview of the respiratory system.
The respiratory system functions to move air into and out of the lungs and provides a surface for gas exchange. The upper respiratory tract consists of the external nose, nasal cavity, and pharynx. The lower respiratory tract includes the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. Inhaled air enters the nasal cavity where it is cleaned, warmed, and humidified on its way through the pharynx, a shared region of the respiratory and digestive systems. Leaving the pharynx, air enters the larynx where 2 pairs of ligaments, together with the mucosa covering them, form the vestibular and vocal folds. These folds help prevent foreign particles, including food, from entering the lower respiratory system. The vocal folds are also known as the true vocal cords because they produce sound when air passes between them. Air next enters the tracheobronchial tree. The trachea, a 10 to 12 centimeter long tube supported by C-shaped cartilages, maintains an open passageway to and from the lungs. The trachea divides into 2 primary bronchi. As the bronchi enter the lungs, they continue to divide into smaller and smaller bronchi and ultimately into terminal bronchioles. Each terminal bronchiole divides repetitively to form respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and alveolar sacs. Each alveolar sac is formed by a group of alveoli. Alveoli are surrounded by pulmonary capillaries. The ultra-thin walls of the alveoli and capillaries serve as a surface for gas exchange between the air and blood. Oxygen diffuses across this membrane into the blood, while carbon dioxide moves from the blood back into the air where it is expelled during exhalation.
Okay, so that's an overview of what we're going to be looking at here. So this is all anatomy here. A couple things that I want to make sure that you realize are important. These turbinates or conchi, superior, middle, and inferior conchi, they change laminar flow. The air that you inhale through your nose comes in with laminar flow. And what laminar flow means is the air is all parallel. Whoops, well that's not quite parallel, is it? It's all parallel like this. Think of the air molecules as being all parallel. And then when it hits the meatuses, these little canals underneath the conchi, the superior meatus, middle meatus, and inferior meatus, it turns into turbulent flow. And what that does is it increases the amount of surface area on the mucous membrane that the air contacts. And that's important because what we're doing is moisturizing and cleaning this air. So this mucous membrane will trap debris and it'll also add moisture to the air. So the conchi or turbinates change laminar flow to to wow. I just the word just slipped my mind. I'm sorry. That's what these turbinate bones do. They change your laminar flow to turbulent flow. And the bones are actually sometimes called turbinates. That's a good way to remember it. Turbinates, turbulent flow. Another thing is these C-shaped cartilages. This is not the main area where I control constriction and dilation of my air passageways. It is true that they're C-shaped. And on the back, there's a trachealis muscle that closes the C. So this is a muscle. And yes, it's true that that trachealis muscle can contract, and you could have a C-shaped cartilage that is pretty tight, or C-shaped cartilage that is more open. So that's all true. But really, where we control the diameter of our air passageways are down here on the bronchioles, where the cartilages are more incomplete, and you have more smooth muscle surrounding your bronchioles. So it's not up on the trachea, although we do have some control there via the trachealis muscle. It is true that the left lung is only two-lobed and the right lung is three-lobed, and you learned that in lab. Okay. This is showing you the lungs, the three-lobed right lung and the two-lobed left lung. You'll notice, well, this picture doesn't really show it to you. I'll kind of, maybe it does. We'll see what you think. The right primary bronchus is more vertical and wider, by the way, than the left primary bronchus. That's more horizontal and not as wide. Because of that, things usually lodge. Things that aren't supposed to be in our air passageway are more likely to lodge in our right primary bronchi, just because it's more vertical and a little bit larger. This is showing you the bronchioles. So we have these terminal bronchioles here. You can see the terminal bronchioles. You can see all the smooth muscle around them. This is the primary area where we control the lumen of our air passageways. So we dilate to allow air to flow easier, and we constrict to reduce the airflow. And then at the very end, at the respiratory bronchioles, we can actually have gas exchange across the respiratory bronchioles. Now, that doesn't mean it's still true that most of our gas exchange occurs around the alveoli. That's absolutely true. But I do want you to know that the respiratory bronchioles, and that's why they're called respiratory bronchioles, are a site of some gas exchange. This is showing you the ciliated mucous membrane that we have here. So it's a pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium with goblet cells interspersed, and the goblet cells, of course, secrete mucus, and you learned that a long time ago back in chapter 4. So this is our mucous membrane with the cilia that'll clean and remove the debris, beat the debris upwards so we swallow it. And then our gastric acids kill whatever living organisms might be in there. It's called the ciliary escalator. So you can see the mucus here with trapped particles. There's trapped particles in our mucus. And the cilia on the pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium are going to beat upward, and they're going to move this mucus upward, and that's what we call the ciliary escalator. I don't see the word here anywhere, but I'll write it for you. It's called the ciliary escalator. Ciliary escalator. That's supposed to be a Y, by the way. Doesn't really look like one, but it will now. Ciliary escalator. This is showing you the goblet cells. So it's called a mucus cell here, but I think I taught it to you in chapter 4 as goblet cell. It is a goblet cell. Secretes the mucus. All right. And it's just showing you the collage of a zoom-in picture of the pseudostratified columnar, ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium with the goblet cells interspersed, and then it shows you the blown up, the zoomed-out picture of the bigger picture. Okay, so that's your air passageway, and that's how we cleanse the air that goes into our lungs. This is still just anatomy. This is the upper respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract is quite often abbreviated URT in medicine. Lower respiratory tract, by the way, is abbreviated LRT. So you can see the nasal cartilages here, and you can see the nasal bone right there. So we breathe through our nose. Obviously, you can breathe through your mouth, but it's more preferable to breathe through your nose, mainly because of the turbinate bones and the meatuses that change laminar flow to turbulent flow. This is showing you this right here is showing you how I'm cutting this man's face. It's a coronal plane or a frontal plane. And when you do that, you can see my concha, inferior nasal concha, middle nasal concha, superior nasal concha. You can see the meatuses now. You can see these meatuses right here, and right here, and how the air is coming in there, and it'll swirl around as it changes to turbulent flow. What else is important here? You can see the maxillary sinus. You can actually see the frontal sinus right here. You can see that. This is a really weird looking back of the eye. This really is a weird cut, but it's a good cut. It's a good cut to show you the how these meatuses, how the turbinates and the meatuses create a great surface area for the air to travel through and be moistened and warmed. You moisten and warm your air this way. It's showing you another, this is a mid-sagittal cut, so it's showing you how you're cutting it mid-sagittally, and we've already looked at this. So let me know in lab, of course, if you have any questions about this anatomy. We've already looked at this too. Okay, so there's your collage. We learned most of the stuff in the anatomy portion of lab. And that's it, folks. I'll be back in the next section.